Good evening and namaste to all of you. Welcome to another session on man management. We'll continue today with the same journey of what we started last week. And let us start with our prayer and we'll take it forward. O Lord, take my love and let it flow in fullness of devotion to Thee. O Lord, take my hands and let them work incessantly for Thee. O Lord, take my soul and let it be merged in one with Thee. O Lord, take my mind and thoughts and let them be in tune with Thee. O Lord, take my everything and let me be an instrument to work for Thee. Dear friends, it's a pleasure to bring you this session on man management. Just a recap, as I told earlier, this concept of man management was given by our master Sri Satya Sai Baba during the inauguration of our MBA program. In fact, he was the one who kind of taught the whole series and coined this term called man management. Because, and he mentioned a very beautiful thing that if you know how to manage human being, a man, then you can manage everything else. Because all the things which are in the business realm are meant to serve. And when we have this attitude of service, things happen. So, carrying that journey, today we are going to just take a quick look on what all we discussed last time and we'll take it forward from there. So, last time when we started, we did touch upon a spiritual outlook to business, and for that, we had already seen that how we interpreted the whole business and the marketplace as the world, mind being the manager, heart being the leader, and we understood the relevance of time and space, and all the activities were defined as karma. And then we also looked at that seven letter of manager that we are continuing to discuss, in which the first one was mind of man, and that literally meant not to have the mind of animal or devil, but to have human mind. And the second more important was the awareness of Atma, that self, that consciousness, that supreme awareness. If we are aware that everything is reflection and reaction of that, then there is a sense of unity, there is a sense of understanding that nothing in this universe is away from me. And that leads to many other beautiful concepts of how to look at people, how to develop cohesive teamwork, and how to develop a very cohesive environment of work also. And in that, we looked at how the elements came about. And all these five elements manifested from the very source, what we call as energy, Atma, or supreme consciousness. And this vibrational movement which is going on has created these five elements. And we also understood the relevance of these five elements in our body also, that our whole body is made up of that. And it is the balancing of that which keeps the rhythm of life alive and keeps us healthy and moving forward in the process of life. And we also looked at the attributes which it brings forth, like you have from sky the subtlest to the grosser, and how the as we move in the creation, we notice how the elements have come about, how this manifestation of different attributes took place. And this is how we understand the creational aspect. And looking at that, we understood how that awareness, that atma or the self or the consciousness, has manifested into so many forms. And this is where we had our discussion had kind of culminated in a manner to understand that where we stand. And obviously I was very happy that we got some good feedback, or should I say some questions on actually on these slides, and people were asking about the elements of nature, how they are impacting us, and how they actually play a role in our healthy lifestyle. And for that, I thought I'll open it up and we'll discuss it. So today I have one Sharda Bhatia. Let me welcome her into this forum. Sharda, are you there? So you can unmute yourself, Sharda.
Yeah, hi. Yes.
Welcome, Sharda, to this session on man management.
Yeah, thank you for
I
having
believe
me
you
here.
had raised my pleasure. It's a pleasure to have you. So, since you had raised the question, I thought, why not you ask directly and we can kind of discuss that thing. So, please, Sharda, introduce yourself briefly and then present your question.
Yeah, sure. So I'm Sharda Bhatia. I'm from Mumbai, and I have been attending the sessions regularly thanks to you. Um I will first post my question and I'll read it out. Will that be okay?
Sure, as you feel, no problem. Or you can read it as well as you're posting it.
All right. So as we had discovered last in the last session that our outer world is the manifestation of our inner state. So, when we are faced with challenges or people who are a contrast of who I am being, how do I identify which elements are creating an imbalance?
Okay. At the outset, if your questions are revolving around this, let me at the set the tone by saying I'm not a professional into Ayurveda.
Yeah.
I don't claim to have an authority on it, but
Hmm.
yes, whatever little we have learned, we are welcome to share here. So, uh, Sharda, your question is like, how do we know how what imbalance has happened and how these
Yeah.
five elements are disturbing us? Correct.
Yeah. Yeah.
Now, first of all,
Especially
we have
when
to understand that when we,
yeah,
yeah, please
especially
carry on.
when when we are confronted with certain situations which are a contrast, of whatever our way of being.
Okay.
Yeah.
See, when we talk about imbalance, first of all, we
Yeah.
should be clear that it doesn't mean that all the five are in the same quantity. Like we all
Right.
know, our body has got,
Yeah.
say, 70% of water or more.
Yeah.
So similarly, the all the five elements are not in the same quantity,
Right.
but they have a very balanced approach. See, like for example, our body temperature is supposed to be 37 degrees Celsius or 98.6 Fahrenheit, So blood pressure should be around 120 to 180. But we know that there is a range of fluctuation which is also allowed. But then everybody can measure themselves to know what is my average, what is my like consistent. See, like heart rate, 60 to 100 is considered better, but those who are athletic, their heart rate is much lower. It can go low as 40. So the point is that these standards are given as an average. So similarly, all these five elements are within us and they have a proportion. Now there are certain people have also created certain kind of tests and all that to measure how much is in each one of us, and we can measure our own selves to know what is my average in my body. So like I have and they call these in the Ayurvedic language they call it tridoshas. They are vata, pitta, and kapha. If you know vata, pitta, and kapha, these are three types of problems or issues which a body can generate, and those are together are called three doshas. Three doshas, that is three deviations from the norm. Now these deviations can happen based on many reasons. It can happen based on lack of sleep, excessive traveling, irregularity of food habits, See, people who go on traveling too much, they also have. So there can be many reasons for these three gunas or three doshas to fluctuate, and one can become prominent. So then we look at it like, how do we identify them? If that is what, it'll help. So just basics. I'm just giving you a very, very basic. They are in no way comprehensive information. So say, for example, vata. Vata is an energy of movements, and they represented by space and air. So if you look at our hierarchy of what do you call this elements and their attributes, the first are, space, then air. So these two are pitta. So any fluctuation of those will reflect either decrease or increase in their ratio would represents vata dosh, and they are actually movement based. Similarly, pitta, pitta is energy of digestion and metabolism, and they have a representation from the element side is fire and water. So which means if you have that kind of a deviation or fluctuation happening, whether it is less or more, then the deviation is based on fire and water. Similarly, kapha, the last one, the third dosha, is called energy of lubrication. It facilitates like phlegm and all that. So that is based on water and earth. So that is why these five elements, that's how these five elements are actually balancing us. And any of the deviation, whether it is less or high, creates doshas. Doshas are, in a simple translation, it could be a deviation from the norm. What should be your and my norm? Say my norm. If it deviates, whether it goes higher or less, it's called dosh. Okay. And this is how it is. And now there are various, you can say, indicators to know what is my dosha. So now it's not possible for everybody to take test every day. But if you monitor your own body, which most of us can do and easily, see, like when we are observing ourselves, we see what kind of issues do I face. See, sometimes it is sleep disorder, or is it digestive disorder, or sometimes anxiety. All this is vata. They indicate vata deviation. If it is gastritis, heat flashes, difficulty in falling asleep, or say mushy bowel movements, they are vata indicators. Similarly, pitta, kapha is obesity, lethargy, and depression, feeling of depression. All that makes it kapha. So if you look at all of that, that becomes an indicator for all of us that, hey, I have this deviation. So then it becomes easy for us to, put a check on it. And they also give you, in Ayurveda, they also give you some kind of an indicative help. But you have to consult a proper person to know exactly what suits you. But as a generic thumb of rule, see, for the vata one, they say keep, like, you have to keep warm, keep calm, don't get aggravated, because wind factor is there. So wind can take you, you may have tendency of getting cold. Avoid frozen and raw food, avoid extreme cold, eat warm food and good spices, don't eat excess. So follow a regular routine and rest plenty, because this is air considered, air and space consider, like, have a connection. If you have a pitta problem, then they say avoid excessive heat, oily food, because here the fire is involved, fire and water is involved. So excessive food, excessive oil, excessive steam, limit salt intake, non-spicy food, exercise. This is part of the pitta. Similarly, for kapha also they give you, like, you do plenty of exercises, because now we have water element more, so that is getting deviated. So they say avoid heavy food. We have rich food, especially Indians, we eat a lot of rich stuff. So avoid dairy food, keep active, don't eat too much of iced and drinks, and avoid fatty oily food. So this is the kind of things which they will tell you. So these are indicators of how to avoid them. So I would not get into too much of it because we are not, that is not my prime focus here. But
Yeah.
since we mentioned the balancing part of it, I thought this is a good information just to keep in mind that 5 elements are important. And as long as we, as our consciously, we monitor ourselves, we will be able to, regulate our life and derive the best health possible from there. I don't know. Does it help you, Shada?
Yeah, it does. Yeah. Thank you.
So, any other questions? Cool. So, thank you very much, Shada. I don't know. Yes. So, any other questions? Then you can always write again, and then anybody else, I would be happy to bring you on. Thank you, Shada, for joining me here, and let's
Thank you.
continue. Thank you, dear. So let's continue with. If you have any other questions, as I said, you're welcome to write and send me a note. And this is we will, whatever little I can share, I'll be more than happy to share here. So we will look at the next now. So we discussed MA yesterday, last week. That was mind of man and awareness of Atma. And today, let us start the next one, which is nature of nations, and that is your N. Nature of nations. Now, the beauty of this is every piece of land, what we see as we call it as a nation, that is also that also has its own characteristics. Nature, the nations also have their own attributes like human beings, because their nation is made up of humans. We, because of our own attitude, our own attributes, we create the societies, which in turn makes a nation. But nation also has own nature, and that is how when we create a society, we give it our own whatever attributes we want to give. Now, when we are doing a business with anybody, or when we are having an interaction or dealing with any nation, this concept reminds us and helps us to understand that before you go into the interactions and dealings, you must understand their basic nature. We must find out how is that country made, what is the core principles and value systems that nature has. Because you may, when you are dealing with any of the countries, any of the nations, we have to be very sensitive and respectful of their culture, their value systems. Only then the two cultures would meet, two value systems would merge and create a healthy environment. Now, for example, if you look at India and America, now look at these two countries. When we do deal the business, we have to understand that India basically has a spiritual basis, and America, as an example, has a very commercial basis. And I'll give you a very beautiful example, which actually Swami Vivekananda had mentioned in a talk. He said, India, people have come here, they have attacked country, they have ransacked it, they have looted it, they have done so much blunders here, but people do not seem to react. And many interpret that as weakness of the whole culture, that people are kind of, they are so valorous. There's no dearth of stories of their valor and strength. But why do they allow people to come and do that? The basic reason for it is that our country's culture is actually based on spirituality. So for a typical Indian nature, anything which we do, anything people do to us, as long as they don't touch our spirituality, our reaction will be slow, because we don't mind. You take my money, you want my money, take it. You want my wealth, take it. Because it does not matter. Because the basis, the core is our spirituality. But the moment you touch the spirituality of this part of the world, people go mad. Then they react. Similarly, if you look at American culture, like the Western mindset, they are brought up in that gratification of senses and the wealth. Now you can do anything there. You can talk about cultures, you can talk about anything. They will still tolerate it, they won't mind it. But touch that part of the world economically, financially, and you see the response. One 9/11 happened, and the whole world was different from that day onwards. Why? Because they touched the core of America. It's a very beautiful thing to understand how everybody reacts, because the amount of death, if you see in many part of the world, that amount of death happens very normal in many parts, but the reaction is not same. Why did it happen? Because we touched their core attribute. I'm making a statements here, but the fact is that once we do business with people, we need to also understand what is the core business, what is the core value system, what is the core culture which is driving us, which is the foundation of it. And only then, when we deal, because it's not just the product, it is not just the services, it is also the value system. It is also the cultural binding that will last you for longer time. So, nature of nations is a very beautiful reminder that when we deal with different cultures, we have to also appreciate the way people have been brought up. Every country feels differently. Every country has their own beauty of a beautiful culture and their own traditions. And our product and services or our interactions and dealings should never hurt anybody, should also complement them. And if that happens, then you have a healthy relationship which will last for longer. And that is the part which is discussed in Nature of Nations. Then the next is A, that is aspect of environment. Aspect of environment is another beautiful thought in manager. It talks about our inner environment and the external environment. See, as a manager or as a person who is managing the show or person who is into the business interactions, our decisions and our actions very much depend on our environment. If I'm disturbed inside, if I'm agitated inside, if I'm not calm and stable inside, then my external reactions would never be calm and clear. I would also always react in a different manner, which will disturb us. Similarly, when my external environment is not responsive, is not conducive, again that would also make a difference. How can I do peaceful business if I have a coronavirus going outside? So my environment does make an impact on me. Now, the environment can be internal, can be external. Now, that environment is broken down into these three beautiful categories. One is political environment. That is obviously the state of affairs, the legalities, the laws, the policies that does make a difference of what business we can do, how much can we grow, what can be done, because there is a policy for labor laws and everything. So all that comes as a part of environment. So political environment. Business is also about our competition, what is the market scenarios, do you study that? And the spiritual environment is your internal environment. So if you look at these three environments, they are very important to manage. They are very important to make decisions. They are very crucial for us to plan our business prospects. So if you look at aspect of environment, so MANA, so this becomes aspect of environment. So far, any questions? I'm keeping the floor open. So if anybody has any thoughts, you're welcome to type in and let me know. So I will continue because these are concepts which are very important for us to understand how they influence and how our master has taught us that whole management is in these. Now you will learn international marketing, business, and everything in this side. So the next is G, and that is guidelines of goodness. Now here the good part is, so here it is that it's especially I'm reminded of the time when there was a crash, banks crashed a decade back, and there was a lot of buzz about proving oneself as a valued person. Many companies jump into the foray to say that we are a value based organization, we care for our customers, we care for our employees, and a lot of things happened because everybody wanted to justify that we are good people, we care. If somebody has done a fraud, that is an exception. So there was a buzz, and whole value word became a buzz in that time, and it still is. But what is the basic understanding of what is good, what is value based organization, and how can we justify that we are good? And in a simple way, it is following the consciousness. Now when I say I am good and I want to serve, I want to help people, how do I justify that? How do I claim that yes, whatever I'm doing is for the benefit of others? Because whatever I do, there will be some people who would always come and say, hey, you have some selfish interest, or you're not clean, because people's view can be different. But how do I satisfy myself that whatever I am doing is right? And that is the easiest ways. If we learn how to connect with our consciousness, how do we understand that that is what creates goodness? So if you say I am following my consciousness, that is the best proof of goodness. Now how do I know that I am following my consciousness? That becomes an exercise, an activity, because every one of us gets a trigger, an indicator from inside. But unless and until we pamper it, we encourage it, we will not be in a position to listen to our conscience. Now, there was some question some time back, people are asking about how do we know that there's a voice of mind playing tricks on me, or it's a voice of my conscience. Now, it is not easy for anybody to tell that this is a parameter or a condition to know the difference. But the easiest way which I have found is, when there is a voice of consciousness, first it will be very clear. There won't be any ambiguity, won't leave any confusion in the mind. But if it is a sound of mind, if it is a voice from the mind, then you will always have duality running. You will always have a sense of doubt, sense of confusion. Should I not? This anytime you have this question arising, then you need to pause and think, because that the doubt or that confusion, that duality of mind which has played tricks, itself shows that conscience voice is challenged. Because when we pamper our conscience, the sound will become more and more clearer, it'll become more and more louder. So it'll hit hit you so beautifully that you will know exactly, yeah, this is the right voice, and there is no ambiguity. There will not be any kind of confusion, and that is the voice. If you follow, however confusing it may appear to, but that will certainly lead to goodness, and goodness will end or result in peace and harmony. So when I say that I want to frame certain policies, I want to frame certain routine, discipline, code of conduct, all of that, if I follow that consciousness with keeping the awareness of spirit and Atma in mind, I would realize that everything will lead for the goodness and welfare of the larger society. It will never be self centered, it will never lead into that, and hence you will never have an ambiguity, you'll never have too many thoughts running. So guidelines of goodness is that creating those guidelines to understand what is good and how to know that it is good. So what is good for me should become good for you, and mutual good can only be better for the society. If there is a confusion, that shows disunity. So in a group activity, or in a business environment where we are dealing with people, we have to find commonality factors which unite. We cannot move forward if there are no unifying factors within our system. So that is guidelines for goodness. The guidelines to know what is good and how to identify what is good. And for all of that, what is responsible is that atmic feeling. And when I say atmic feeling, it is in simple words, means that oneness of cosmic awareness or supreme consciousness. We understand that what I'm feeling for others originates from that feeling of oneness. And then only the guidelines of goodness is in action. So we understand that. See, the goodness gives me the right to discriminate, the ability to discriminate, the tools to discriminate. And all of that is possible only when we have that conscious awareness of Atma, that that spirit, that supreme consciousness is all pervasive. See, if you keep that in mind as a preface, then the whole goodness format would work very beautifully. And that is important. So that is what is guidelines of goodness. And the E is inquiry into ethos. Now, ethos, in a Sanskrit term, it comes from itihas. Itihas means history. The master explains it very beautifully, puns these words, and very beautifully says, what is this history as we talk about? He says, history is, according to him, is his story. H capital. His story is history. Now, who is this his? Whose story becomes history, and which is itihas? So, itihas, so he says the history is the story of those people who are noble, who have lived a life of sacrifice, a life which can be emulated, a life which can be followed, idealized, and those lives are worthy to be narrated, worthy to be remembered, worthy to be shared, because those lives make a difference in our life. And those lives together actually should constitute history. So, history is his story, the story of those wonderful people. So, in Sanskrit, it is called itihas. Itihas. So, the feeling that ethos, which originates from the past, learning from these stories, is itihas. And that became ethos. Now, this ethos is what? What is ethos then? What is itihas? Now, these are the moral values which we learn from the lives of our people. The true history is a story of noble men and women. Now, when you learn from them, the value systems that we pick up from them, they become ethos. So, what is the ethos of my country, my community, my organization, my family? It all depends on who do I follow, who do I imitate, who do who do I keep as my ideal, and that is what leads us into inquiry. That inquiry into others' ethos as to who is their role model. Today, unfortunately, we don't teach our children to find how to look for good role models. We have not learned ourselves in that manner. Unfortunately, for decades, people who become, who attract us in certain attributes, we tend to make them as our role models. For example, suppose I like movies and I have a film star whom I admire his acting. I start putting his posters all around my house and he becomes my ideal. Now, the problem in that is if either a sports star or a film star or any other person, in these people may be good at one act. A film star can be good in acting and I admire his acting. A musician can be good in his playing instrument or singing. I may admire that quality or that attribute about that person. But the mistake happens when we start following that person as a role model. The problem happens when you start following a person, then we start finding out about them, we start chasing them. And there we see there are so many things which they do in life or they have been doing in life which can mess up other person's life. They may not be up to the mark. They may not be up to the standards of the ethics and ethos or the cultural values that we are following. It doesn't mean that the person is not good. The problem is that person was good, suppose in playing football or singing or dancing or acting or any such thing. But now what we have done, we have tried to raise him into an ideal scenario and expect that he should be perfect in all the roles that he's supposed to play. And we have not taught ourselves nor our children that while choosing a person as a role model or as an ideal for sports, if you like, then we have to be careful that understand how to choose the good from people and leave what is not good for you. Unfortunately, when we take a person, we try to imbibe everything around that person. Oh, she's a fantastic singer, and you want to follow her, then you want to dress like her, you want to talk like her, you want to have the relations like her, you want to have the social system like her. Not possible, because that's the way they live, the environment in which they live is different from others. So the inquiry into ethos teaches us the real way of looking for ideal people is only those people who have a noble lifestyle, who have lived a life of sacrifice, of surrender, of values. And when you look at the life as a holistic, then only we can follow. So I can choose X actor, Y sports star as my ideal for that particular role, but I should learn not to take the things which may not be applicable or good for me. There is always a thing called deshkal paristhiti, time, place, and circumstances. So based on that, we need to have the discrimination. So inquiry into ethos also teaches us that how do we differentiate these factors and then choose what is good for me. And that's why in the Eastern culture, even though we had giants of personalities in our past, but the ideals when we choose and promote them as a role model, they are only those people who have a blemishless life, who have a persona larger than life, who have represented. a life of values, a life of ethos. So in our system, the leaders like Vivekananda, Ramakrishna, Dhruva, Prahalad, see, these are the characters which were promoted as role models. It doesn't mean that in that era or in our history, we didn't have other superstars in other areas. But to be nominated as a role model, the person needs to be a holistically developed. So today we may lack that kind of a persona, but the fact is, if we have learned to take what is good, because everybody has goodness, everybody has something positive to offer. If only we can learn to extract what is good, what is nice, what is noble, then things can change. So, inquiry into ethos is that inquiry to find out who are those influencers, who are those people who have created real history of that land, of that place, of that family, and then take it from there. So, that is what is ethos, inquiry into ethos. And the last one, manager, is our role of rules. Now, role of rules is another interesting factor that we all can understand and appreciate it, that when we talk about any activity, in including ourselves, if we have to live a life of a good life, and if you want to have a regulated lifestyle, there is a rules. We have to follow rules and regulations. But the catch of rule of rules is that we have to follow them without violating, changing, manipulating, or creating any conflict of conscience. See, sometimes we are all smart in that. When we see a rule, immediately our mind will think how to break it. As they say, rules are made for breaking, because that's how we think, and we try to justify the deviations that we create. Now, that is where your role of consciousness will come in. Because if your conscience is clear, then you would know, even if you can justify it beautifully to the world, but in your heart of hearts, it will trick you and tell you that, hey, you are deviating from the rules. I can justify coming late. I can give a valid reason, a legally formatted word letter, and my boss or nobody can touch me because, yes, I have a valid reason to not follow that regulation or coming late for that day or for that period. But whether it is really justifying, am I violating or changing, manipulating, that my conscience will surely tell me. I can pretend in front of the world saying that, I have followed the rule and any deviation is valid deviation. But my conscience will certainly prick me and tell me that, hey, there is some problem. And that is the important thing. So in role of rules, we have to understand that rules are important. They are meant to give us ease of working. They are meant to facilitate our functioning. They are meant to really make things happen, and happen in a cordial manner, and make it happen. And they are not there to disrupt or frustrate you. So that is the beauty of role of rules. And to follow them, we need to follow our conscience, and that is important. So for every environment, role of rule does not have only for human beings. This you can extend it to every environment: workers, factories, raw material, market. Everything can be evaluated properly based on this. Role of rule also helps us to identify what is our limits, what are our boundaries. So if I say I will do that, I will not do that, that also tells me my boundary. And when I take this concept even to my work environment, I can also identify the limitation of my work, that I am only eligible to do this much, I can only do that, I cannot do more or less. So that is how the role of rules can help. So if you look at all of these seven letters, literally when we can dissect them, we can take them more in depth, to understand it better. But that is how this role of rules is taken into account. And all the seven letters, if you look at it, manager, they in fact cover every aspect of our life, our business life, be it mind of man, awareness of Atma or spirit, nature of nations, aspect of environment, guidelines of goodness, or inquiry into ethos or role of rules. So these are the seven letters which are important for us to understand in management, in carrying out our lives. And this is how we can spiritualize our business, our professional environment also. So, whatever we do, how to improve ourselves to knowing our lacuna of one element. Sonalika, we have already shared the answer, so I hope that helps you in those elements part of it. If there is any question before I touch upon a few more concepts, but that is basically the seven letters of manager, which explains. I've just given you a flavor of man management. Obviously, when you go into each one of them in detail, and as I mentioned to you, he has explained about sales, about marketing, leadership, taxation, administration, accounting. So there are many flavors to that, which help us to understand how every aspect can be spiritualized. So I will leave the floor open as I discuss other points. If you have any questions, anybody wishes to ask right now, or any suggestions they want to share, you are welcome. I'll keep the floor open. So please feel free to write. And if anybody wants to come in to the show, please let me know. So, uh, Vibha, if you can put the question fully properly. I don't know that one sentence you have mentioned here. So, so anybody, let me know if you, Vibha, if you can write the full question. I'm just reading. Okay, as any new questions come, let me share another concept with you all. Uh, I have 10 minutes, so one concept I can share more if you are open to that. And that concept is process for growth. I'm very happy to share these things because, you know, many times we don't get time to read our scriptural things to know. And this is a fantastic thought, how our scriptures at the ancient time have taught us how to look at the growth pattern and how do we understand the process of growth. Now, process of growth starts with inquiry. That's called yatum in Sanskrit. See, the anytime when you want to grow in life, in your business or anything, the first and the foremost step is inquiry. Second is practice. That is called drishtum, gyatum, drishtum, and third is pravishtum. So inquiry, practice, and experience. So if you look at this concept, it's a spiritual concept actually, and see how it is related to the business life. Gyatu means to know, a desire to know, and that has been translated as inquiry. So if you want to grow, you want to go into a new market, you want to do something in life, then first is that inquisitiveness, the curiosity to know, and that is gyatum. And when you inquire, when you want to know about it, when you chase it, then second is drishtum. Drishtum is when you start visualizing it, seeing it, and that is the practicing part of it. When you work on it. So one, I have learned, I understand what it is. Now let me execute it. And that becomes drishtum. Drishtum in Sanskrit literally translates as seeing, knowing, seeing, and pravishtum is entering, become one. And that experience of pravishtum is that once, sayuktam, as Lord explains, it's like oneness. You start experiencing oneness. So knowing, seeing, and becoming one, praveshtum, is inquiry, practice, and experience. So if you want to go into any of these new lines or whatever, first and foremost, inquire, get curious, find out what is it, and then practice it, then put it into practice, discover, find it out, and then you will experience the oneness, which is praveshtum. That becomes one. So that is how the growth pattern, if you look at it, how do we grow in life, is this: inquiry, practice, and experience. Gyatum, drishtum, praveshtum. So let me see. Viva, you have written, if you are forced to do something by the higher authority that does not abide to the law, what are we supposed to do in that situation? Oh, so you have a moral dilemma here that uh, I presume I'm understanding it right. Divya, you're not in the studio. I can't bring you in. If you would have let me know before, then I would have been happy to bring you onto the studio and you could have shared it. But I will try to read it and see if it can be flashed. Yes. If we are forced to do something by the higher authority that does not abide to the law, what are we supposed to do in that situation? See, this question actually, you know, has little premise to it. One, you feel there is an illegal activity going on that is not abiding by the law. If it is a clear illegal activity, obviously, then you can choose it. But in today's time, it is not easy to differentiate. See, no business or corporate will go into an illegal act. So when I say that illegal act is like doing something which is against the nature of the safety and security of the country or the society, see, that becomes illegal activities if you're siphoning the funds or whatever. But there are other elements which is a moral dilemma for you, which you may have a conflict of your belief systems. There can be situations. I like to keep my response to that factor because I presume that the other factor is not there. This question does not hint on those things because nobody will come with that business which will be against the law. But yes, certain activities in the business can be interpreted as unlawful activities. And that is also based on your interpretation of law as well as the moral code of ethics. So when you feel like that, then there is a possibility of conflict. Now, there, in a very broad sense, I can only suggest you there are ways of looking at it. First, don't presume that it is illegal or unlawful, even if it appears to be. So the first step would be consult or share your concern, but learn how to share it. Don't go with the tone of a complaint. Don't go with the tone of an authority that as if you know what is right and they don't know. Because if the system has been running for donkey years and they have been doing certain things in a manner which is accepted in the system, they may have a valid reason to go on. Or there's a possibility that they are doing it because nobody found a better way to do it. And they found that to be an easier way to get through it. It can be an act of bribery, which we think is a bribe. But sometimes bribery has become part of our system so much that it is no longer hidden. It can be turned into a perks, it can be turned into a Diwali gift, it can be turned into anything. And then it is no longer a bribe unless and until it impacts or harms the social environment, or it harms the peace and the harmony of the society and the customer at large. See, in those environments, you can talk about it. You can share with your feeling and concern. But the best part is, are you in a position to understand why they're doing it? That also depends on the hierarchy at which you are stable right now. If you are a newcomer in the system and you see something discrepancy, you are not in a position to guide them or tell them that it is right or wrong. At best, you can ask them, sir, why is it so? At best, you can learn as to what they are doing, which appears to you as not right. So ask them to justify it, but don't ask them as an authority, as if you are right and they are wrong, because you still don't know the whole scenario. And the more you go higher in the hierarchy, and if you still believe that that is not right, then at least from your point onwards, you can start fixing the things. And that is a time when you can say that, look, I understand under what circumstances and scenarios this practice was being done, but here I have an alternate way of doing it and can be played. I had a friend in New York, he was in stock exchange before, and they had to play with a number game at the end of the year. I'm just making it a very abridged version for you. And if they did not achieve the target, there would be a huge financial loss to everybody. And when the boss calculated it, they realized that even if they work harder, that was very tough to achieve. So he called as a meeting for all his colleagues and he said, look, I feel let us try it. Otherwise, we'll just manipulate the numbers. We'll just play with the numbers. And when the next first week of the January comes in, we will have met the target and this numbers will become real then. So it was like just a number game to play on the paper and nothing will happen. No loss, nobody would get hurt at all. So it was a very clear from his point of view also it was clear. He said if I don't do that number, then our balance sheet will get impacted and the whole thing will get topsy-turvy. And then even if I make enough in the first week itself, it won't compensate that. So he was consciously clean that he's doing nothing wrong in playing that. But a friend of ours who had this, you know, mind, who felt that there was something not right. So he requested, he said, boss, before you do the play, we still have few weeks to play with. Allow me to try. Let me see if I can, work harder, work extra, and meet the numbers properly. And the boss said, sure, why not? Go ahead, try it. So he tried his 3 weeks. Now see what happened here. He didn't tell the boss that you are wrong. So legally, if you look at it, that scenario says that the person was wrong in doing that. He was manipulating the numbers. But a junior staff, he may not have, he understood the pressure on the boss, but he may not know the whole scenario under which this person was making a decision. And the way the boss made a decision was also very valid because just by changing a number for a week, he was able to pass on the problem and nobody would get impacted. So, both ways it is justifiable. But to him, it was like even this manipulation is unethical. So can we work extra and see that we pass it on? So look at the dilemma of the person. So there was no confrontation between boss and the juniors, but both of them made their points, both justified their situations. I hope you're getting it, Viva. And then what came out was fantastic because everybody got in together, they joined hands, and they tried to make that difference in that number together, realizing very well that if they can achieve it, then they will be, the conscience also will be clear. So look at how we play. So before you point a finger or say that it is unethical or illegal, we need to understand the challenges, what goes through in the society. According to Chanakya, for example, which Bhagawan as Master has given us, the taxation rate should be around 3 to 5%. Now, in most of the world countries, I'm from Canada, I know US, India, if you look at any of these countries, our taxations are humongous. They go from 35% to 50%. Now look at the ideal scenario in which they say you must have taxation of 3 to 5% on agriculture, certain amount, from industry, certain amount, but nothing crosses 10%. And in that, you provide a society which has got all the insurance and everything for the whole country. Everybody is taken care of. There is a health care, there is education, there is everything in that 7% taxation. In that scenario, everybody pays taxes. Here, we have 40% taxation, and the population which pays taxes is hardly 2 to 3% or 5% to the max. Fair taxes, I'm talking about. So there are so many factors which play in, which makes you go in a path which may appear morally or ethically wrong. They may sound as if, hey, you're wrong. But understand the scenarios. We are dealing with a scenario which is already so much corrupted. But as long as we know what is true, what is expected, and then look at the gap, do the gap analysis, and then as you are able to, with your authority, with your positioning, you can lead the organization to that. So if I start my organization, at least I can be clear that, okay, I will follow this protocol. But if I'm interacting with another organization, I cannot change their protocol. Hence, I may have to respect that protocol and learn to play with them. And that is where all these roles come into play. So we have to be very careful about usage of words to understand. That is why I said this man management, which our master taught, is so phenomenal. It's so it's so subtle to know how to interpret ethics, how to understand what is dharma, what is righteousness. It is not black and white, and there are so many permutation combinations which need to be appreciated. That's why it's always good to be humble about it, and it's always good to remain in that passive mode to understand before we make a statement. But we are always allowed to make inquiries, we are allowed to question, but we must learn how to question. That's why in my previous sessions I had even shared this process of questioning. How do you question? Pariprashna technique I had taught. I had shared that technique of pariprashna, qualifying your questions. And question should be always presented with humility, with respect, with reverence. Then only the learning will flow. If you ask a question with pride and arrogance, or as if you know the answer and you're just testing somebody, then you will never get the right answer. You will always have the confusion. So Vivad, thank you. I hope you got it. Yeah, thank you for clearing. That's it. Okay, Sonalika, you're saying when we know one's core nature that full of complaint or negativity, then what should be able for better understanding how to deal with that person? I'm trying to understand this question, Sonalika. When we know one's core nature full of complaint and if the person's core nature is complaining nature, and you're not, maintain distance. Sonalika, if you are dealing with people who are always in a complaining mode, then maintain distance. That shows that maybe you are not ready to receive that kind of vibrations. And negative vibrations can certainly influence you. And that negativity, before it disturbs you, you avoid it. And that's why there's a beautiful statement, we say, maintain 10-arm distance from the negative people. It's not that they are bad, but they are bad for you. So you have to understand that if I'm good, you are good, we may not be good for each other. So everybody is good in life, but are they good for you? That is the question. So what you find negative may not be negative for others. But if it is negative for you and doesn't allow you to think and remain calm, then maintain distance. Okay. So if you look at this, so I'm sure man management is a very big topic, and I've just attempted to introduce you this concept here. And if there is any further questions, my time is also up. I'd like to keep it within the time zone. So if there is any questions, any request for more on these, then I can even share more, or we'll take up new topics as you suggest. So please feel free to mention your interesting topics and your further questions. I eagerly look forward for your comments and suggestions, uh, either here or even on YouTube. When you forward the videos and you watch them, you are welcome to please put a comment there on the YouTube. More comments I see, I feel encouraged, and I can continue to do these offerings. So I welcome you all to please share. The video will be on the channel, www.youtube.com/abhicall-via. So please feel free to share, feel free to subscribe, like, and forward to your friends and family. And please share your comments. Thank you very much for your wonderful participation. Thank you, Sharda, for joining me here. And I welcome any one of you who wishes to come and discuss certain topics with me online. I'll be happy to bring them onto the studio, and we can even create a forum to discuss any topic. It can be from business, it can be from parenting, it can be from value-based education, or whatever. So more than welcome. Thank you very much, and Sairam, and thanks.